Welcome everyone. Apologies for the IT hiccups we had. Welcome to our April public meeting. We do have a pretty good agenda today, and I think mostly from our SLA friends. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and welcome everyone in the room and online. And this meeting has been recorded and been going live on Facebook as well. So if you want to, refer back later, you have an opportunity to do that as well. And today, before we get into major things for today, so just today's agenda would be updates on the Gungahlin Town Centre East, updates on Moncrief Group Centre, Taylor Local Centre engagement, and Jacka Local Centre engagement as well. So these are the planned agenda for tonight. And then if you're watching online, if you have any questions, please do post on the comments so that we can get back to you with the answers. So the first item, I would probably, we will kick off with the SLA. I'd like to welcome Andrew Griffith, Development Director for the SLA, Gungahlin Community, for the Gungahlin Community Council meeting. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here. So as noted there, we've got a bit of an update on a number of sites today. It is moving on from the last update we were here where we did talk to quite a lot of these items. So some of them haven't moved substantially on from last time, but we'll be able to give the progress on where they're up to. And then, as was noted there, I'll probably try to move through my presentation in two elements. The first part of the agenda, and then we'll look at the Jacka Local Centre at the end, which we have some engagement activities off to the side. So as noted there, that's what we're running through today, which is Gungahlin Town Centre, then into Kenny, Moncrief, Taylor and Jacka. I think I mentioned this last time I was here, that it's very unique to be able to talk about the full retail hierarchy of the ACT, because we've got a town centre, a group centre and a local centre, which doesn't pop up that often. So it is good to be able to give updates on those important strategic sites. So jumping just quickly into the town centre, obviously a lot of interest in this one, and I note that there was some discussion in the Legislative Assembly on Tuesday. Mr Braddock had a question, and another one from, I believe, Ms Clay. Just in terms of noting in that one, Minister Berry did update the timing of that, so we are expecting what is the next key milestone in the Gungahlin Town Centre of the Place and Design Framework. Just to put that into common English, the Place and Design Framework is a master plan that will drive government's direction. It kind of talks to things like zoning, provisioning of commercial, laneway structures, public domain, all of those nice bits and pieces. So we are eagerly moving through finalising that Place and Design Framework. We do expect it to be out within the next few months, as Minister Berry indicated. And we will get that one up onto your say, but that one does deserve a substantive presentation. So we will try to book some time in with the Community Council early into the next financial year to run through the Place and Design Framework, the next steps for the Gungahlin Town Centre, which is where we move into what's now called a subdivision application. That subdivision application is more of your detailed design, where we're really running through planning controls, moving things into the new territory plan and things like that, where it actually then becomes rules and guidance. So that one will definitely try to be back in front of the Community Council within a few months early in the next financial year to run through in some detail. It is worth waiting for that Place and Design Framework to be published, because that geospatial visual information is really, really useful to try to talk through that project. Very difficult to do it from pictures like this, but those maps will make it very clear. I expect we'll have quite a lot of interest in how the commercial is going to work, what the provisioning of the community facilities are, how employment opportunities will run through. So we will look to do that one in a few months. Jumping quickly into build to rent. So within the current indicative land release program, government published an intention to deliver the next build to rent site within the Gungahlin Town Centre. So that is intended in the probably upcoming indicative land release to be identified as block 1 of section 249. That is still getting looked at, so it is an indicative land release program. We are still finalising the blocks that work there. It's intended to be around a 300 to 350 yield or plus thereabouts. And one of the key elements of the build to rent is government is presently looking at a 15% affordable component. So that's a component that will be taken to market with a threshold sale price targeted towards lower socioeconomic or whatnot. So we'll keep the Community Council updated as that one runs through. It's presently indicated as a release in 24-25. Now it is a little bit linked to that Gungahlin Town Centre subdivision plan of whether that will go out as land ready or whether it will still have some elements of the project needing to run through into the next financial year. But we'll be intending to have that initial stage release go out, but there may be a few elements such as the subdivision plan still to finalise to bring that one to market. Moving into block 1 of section 228, so that's up to the north of the town centre. It's currently functioning as a car park. SLA did bring out the first stage of a tender process on that one last financial year. We are still working through what the remaining release process to get that one to market is. There has been some elements identified moving into the second stage of this tender process relating to new territory plan implications and some other elements. So we are just contemplating those and looking at what is the appropriate timing and stages of a two-stage tender, or possibly re-looking at possibly a single-stage tender. I expect we'll be able to come back on that one in the next few months of what SLA's plans are to getting that one out to market, but it should be finalising its sale process within the next couple of months, whether it goes the two-stage process or a single-stage process. Kenny is the last large-scale greenfield site identified in Gungahlin at the moment. There is again potential for some other greenfield spaces within Gungahlin on the periphery that aren't yet on the indicative land release program, but at the moment this is the last key piece within Gungahlin. Quite a large-scale release process. We are doing the initial planning right now of concept and then master plan and then into a subdivision process. There'll be lots of mandatory opportunities for engagement with industry, government, community as we run through Kenny. It is currently tipping on 2 different years within the indicative land release program. So whether the first release year is 25-26 or 26-27, that'll be subject to the forthcoming indicative land release program, but we are actively working towards those first releases in accordance with the indicative land release program. As noted up on here, some of those first steps we'll be looking to do is finalising that master plan that gives a little bit more clarity towards the yield, the density, the typology, or when I say typology, your apartment mix, townhouses, single res and where they sit. Also too, that initial master planning process will look at things like commercial opportunities, community facility opportunities, on all of those bits and pieces. Lots of engagement will happen on this one, and SLA is continuing to evolve our place-led process of trying to get early and often in terms of our engagement approach. I suspect that there'll be a good opportunity to do, again, a substantive presentation on Kenny within the next few months after we start to move a little bit closer towards a master plan that, again, has some useful information of what our initial thinking is for the development opportunity of Kenny. Jumping into the Moncrief Group Centre, so just quickly for scale or equivalent blocks, you'd be looking at if you're familiar with that part of the world, you'd be looking at a KC or an Amaroo type scale. Maybe Amaroos the more reasonable one to have a look at of what the scale of this future group centre might be. So typically your 4 to 6 stories, lots of opportunities for full-line supermarket. While the slides up here note up to 90 dwellings, that's what's currently identified on the planning stuff. It's probably not an upper limit, so whoever does get the site will have opportunity to explore the development potential of the site. One of the sites has a residential yield on it, which was at 90. The other site was a little bit vacant around its commentary on yield. Quite a substantial site. We're very, very close to finalising the second stage tender on this one, so it will definitely be this side of the end of financial year, but hopefully 1 month back on that. So we're expecting around May, possibly mid to the end of May. This one should be out to market. There is then a process of evaluating the tenders when they come back, hopefully picking our successful tender and then working with that developer. So we are still, after the sale process over around that 12 to 18 months before you're likely to see DAs looked at or buildings coming out of the site. You may also find with a site of this scale there could be some staging, but we have put some provisions within our sales pack for the developer to move through certain processes that give us some visibility, so we'll be able to report back to the Community Council and other interested stakeholders what the developer's intentions are, what the timing they're looking to move through. So next stage will be trying to sell the site, and then after that we'll start to hopefully get some visibility on the tenancies that the successful developer's looking at and the timing that they're looking to bring things to market. Similar on the Taylor Local Centre, but that one's a little bit closer. So that site, I think I updated last time, has exchanged already, and it's coming very close towards settlement. So settlement is forecast for late this financial year. Hopefully that'll be around April or May. There are a few elements in terms of just being finalised that could have some impact on what that exact date is, but we are pretty confident that we'll be able to settle on that site this financial year. At the local scale, it is again intended to be shops and convenience retail for the local community. So we haven't mandated things like a supermarket in there. There's definitely potential for a supermarket, but it will ultimately be up to the developer with us providing background documents on the community engagement we did around what the community's desires are. We have mandated some, or are intending to mandate some elements of minimum commercial. So there are requirements around the developer doing minimum outcomes, but we haven't been very, very specific around the tenancies, just to allow that flexibility for the developer to be able to make sure that they've got a viable operation into the long term on that site. We are just finishing off the car park as we speak. So SLA has done the public domain car park that's around the outside of that local centre. So it's nearing completion, and that's kind of what is sitting on the critical path for settlement. So once the car park's finished and we get operational acceptance, that'll trigger the ultimate settlement process, which we are hopeful to be within the next 2 months, or definitely this side of the financial year at this stage. I think that's probably a pretty good milestone within the presentation, just to ask if you had any comments, questions or queries on what we've done to date. And then I'll try to deal with those then, and then we can probably finish off with the Jackal Local Centre afterwards, just because that Jackal Local Centre is geared a little bit more towards an active engagement process. So certainly happy to open it up if anyone in the room or online had any comments, questions or queries relating to the presentation.
Hi, I was just wondering, with the East Gungahlin framework that you're doing, have you come up with or decided on what the height limits would be?
Look, yeah, so I probably have to answer that one in two elements. So the existing territory plan, or the new territory plan through DV 364, did set some height limitations. Now, a place and design framework hasn't rigidly tried to stick towards those. So what we've tried to do there is get communities' views and government's views and align those, and our heights are now what will be proposed in the place and design framework. It does have some variance towards the current territory plan, so that's what that subdivision process that I talked about does. The subdivision process is quite a robust process back again, which goes through government. It'll probably have my understanding is a circulation process back out to community that says this is what's proposed, and then everyone from your roads entities within the ACT to the planning directorate have their say and make sure that the rules work. But there are some higher elements and some lower elements. So there's some spots within the place and design framework that would be lower. There's some spots that would be higher than what's currently planned or permissible. I think the easiest way to deal with that question is we'll be back within a few months to do a substantive presentation where we can actually show geospatial layered approaches that show here's what is proposed for heights, here's where we're intending commercial will sit, here's where where community facilities will sit. So I think the best way to answer that one is that we'll do a presentation once the framework's been passed through, and then we'll also talk about what the forward steps are to aligning what's in the place and design framework to the territory plan, which then after all of that's done, you should have both of those two documents lining up.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. The site next to the current car park site, which is currently getting developed in the Gungahlin Town Centre. Yeah, that one.
Yep.
Yeah, is that fully commercial or is it going to be a mixed development?
Its zoning is CZ1, which is called commercial core, but that does allow for a mix of uses.
Yep.
So you would, it's always hard to know until a developer shows
Sure.
their definite intent. There's a mandatory first floor commercial under the new territory plan, so that first floor, from my understanding, has to be commercial scale, but it's permissible to do things like residential community facilities and a range of other uses on that site. So
Okay.
you would potentially expect for a site of that scale that it would be a mixed use outcome, but it does have a range of uses. Its zoning is commercial core.
Okay. Just follow-up question on that is car park. Is there going to be a car park underground or is there going to be a car park there? One. And sorry, adding on to that intersection is already pretty.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a high pressure intersection and getting into a Kmart car park down under is crazy during the weekends. So how are we going to manage that whole
absolutely.
scenario? Yeah, thank you.
So excellent questions. The initial engagement with TCCS, I'm not sure if the laser's working, but the initial engagement with TCCS is showing that the main access would actually be through here, so that we're not impacting this intersection, which is probably one of the higher ones, and there's a low intention of wanting to have Anthony Ralph access beyond service vehicles. So it's probably looking like it would utilise existing intersections off that mid-block a little bit further back. In terms of the car park question, that's a good one. So that the territory plan, as it sits, has a rule within it to say that there is a intention for this site maintaining publicly accessible car parking. Now, the scale of that's not specified within the territory plan, so we are going through a process now, which is part of, again, getting that second stage of this process to market. We are going through that process of engaging with government around what is the scale of car parking that should be within there. It's a good question on the basement or the surface. I would expect with the development potential of that site, it will likely be basement, but that will be a matter for the developer to determine. You would think within that location and what surrounds there and the fact of its zoning, they'll probably look at wanting to go possibly 1 or 2 stories of basement, but again, that'll be particularly when they have to do the public accessible car parking on top of any car parking yield that their development draws. You would think it'll probably go into the ground, but we will leave that one to the developer to determine.
Thanks, Andrew.
Do you want me to jump into the next part of the...
I think I'll just look into the Facebook just to see.
Sure.
So I think it's just a comment. It would be good to have one or more comprehensive idea of the look and feel of the Gungahlin East.
Yep. Yeah, so to that one again, I think we're targeting the release of that place and design framework this side of the financial year. So I think in July or August or September, whenever is convenient for the Community Council, we'll try to get on the agenda to do a solid presentation on the Gungahlin Town Centre East Place and Design Framework, and I think that one will then show the collateral that's really useful for that conversation. It should then be, people can go away on their own time and digest it, but I suspect that presentation will drive a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah. And with the build to rent project that you were referring to,
yep.
With the 249 blocks, section 249
yep.
block 1. So we're talking about the 350 dwelling. Is it all built to rent? So if that's the case, is it owned completely by ACT government, or is it going to be leased like a normal commercial thing, and then someone would buy the land and they would build based on built to rent?
It's a good question. So the exact delivery method of that one hasn't been determined yet, because it is for the next financial year's release. Yeah. My understanding at the moment is they are looking to package up towards non-government owned, so it would be ACT's involved in helping out with that 15% affordable component, but not an active participant in ownership of the building. But again, that'll get looked at as the product comes to market. There'll be some engagement with industry again to get that build to rent out, and that'll look at again yield scale, delivery methods, even things like commercial opportunities on the blocks. So at this stage, it would probably be packaging it up towards selling it to a private developer or consortium to operate without ACT government's involvement, but we'll explore those elements with the relevant parts of government.
Is it going to be like a community house, or is it going to be separate?
Look, I'm not the expert on build to rent, but typically it's just a different typology where it's the entity that owns the building holds the product, and then the leaser takes out a longer term lease. So ultimately you tend to have one or more people holding the tenancy, and then the renter or the person gets that security of a longer term lease. They could, when they're developing it, decide to do mixed, where they do part build to rent, part serviced housing, but that's again a matter for the developer to look at what yield works for them.
Would there be a commercial element?
There's potential on that site for commercial elements. Yeah. So as we go through that release process, we'll look at whether it's mandated, whether there's an active frontage, or whether the industry feedback comes back and says the commercial makes it unviable. So those type of questions do get explored, and we'll engage with industry around what, if any, commercial component works for that site.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to consider those commercial component, not just a normal coffee shop or anything, but
for sure,
like a office space, and get those employment
Yep. And it does sit within the Gungahlin Town Centre East Precinct, so we have already had that rough idea about where we think the commercial works. So we're definitely looking at it not just from the build to rent on its own, but where the build to rent fits within that Gungahlin Town Centre precinct.
Yeah. And with the Block 1, Section 228,
Yep.
so with that one, I know it's a mixed commercial uses. You were saying in the level 1, it's going to be it has to be likely to be commercial.
Yes, so my understanding of the current territory plan rules is that the ground floor is effectively mandated as non-residential.
Yeah.
So commercial, possibly community facilities, other uses, but it's non-resi on that ground floor. That doesn't stop them from doing a non-resi on higher floors as well, but presently my understanding of the rules are that ground floor has specified uses that prohibit residential.
Yeah. How would the car park work for those people? You know, whatever the facility that's going to come as let's say it's a commercial element for the level 1. So the car parks for those spaces is going to be as part of your rule that you need to have a dedicated car space for people attending those commercial facility. Considering it's on a very interesting corner, like it's just on the main street, and there's no street parking available nearby. So there's already congested. So are we putting consideration on those?
Yeah, for sure. So we do look at traffic arrangements and engage with Transport and City Services when we're looking at those things. I kind of talked there a bit before that my expectations for that site is it'll probably go basement. Again, that's a question for the developer. And what you're talking about there in terms of where they provision public spaces versus resident spaces versus others, that gets looked at as part of the development application process. So when a building goes in, the development application team will look at the generation of the site, how many car parking spaces is reasonable, and the developer will need to provision a scheme that talks to that and shows sufficient car parking spaces for the public spaces they need and the spaces that they will have as a result of their development uses.
Okay, so it's not something we can mandate as part of your lease agreement?
What will probably be mandated is the public car parking spaces. So that site has a control on it that says there's an intention for an element of public car parking spaces that will go into the lease. Outside of that, the DA will determine what scale of car parking is needed based on the uses that the developer puts forward.
Thanks, Andrew. And
there's a pretty robust process there when the DA goes in of engaging with TCCS. Sometimes there'll be further traffic studies, sometimes not, but there is quite a robust process of determining appropriate provisioning of car parking spaces and also to looking at the traffic arrangements in that space.
Because at the moment the traffic in that, as you know, it's a chaos.
And we definitely don't want to agitate it as part of this development, so that is being looked at quite closely.
I'm even curious how the construction process is going to happen without, because that's one of the main road connecting to the town centre, and I think a lot of things need to be considered even during the construction phase. And the modelling, most of the times the modelling for the traffic, I don't know what modelling you are using, but I never seen it working in a reality. It sounds good in a paper, but when you put it in a practice, it's always a challenge there.
Sure. Well, we can definitely leave the comments on the traffic modelling to our Transport City Services colleagues who are the experts in that space. It is quite a complex, challenging space of forecasting your traffic versus the actual outcomes. And the town centre of Gungahlin Town Centre is unique there, where it's got an established footprint, so there's mitigations you can do, but sometimes changing things you'd like, if they're already there, it's very difficult to go back and change. So I think TCCS are doing a really good job of the modelling that they're getting, but the elements such as drastically improving the function of traffic around that block is somewhat difficult. What we want to do with our development is not to agitate or make it worse.
Okay, cool. And with the Kenny, so the indicative land release for the Kenny, would that be this year or?
Definitely not this financial year. I believe, and sorry, I can follow this up if I get it wrong. So I believe it's currently under the 25-26 financial year, but possibly the forthcoming indicative land release program might move that out 1 year. So we work to the indicative land release program that's published presently, and that, as being indicative, it can change from time to time depending on the status of where projects are up to. So we're actively working with trying to bring Kenny to market as soon as possible. It definitely won't be this financial year. Just progressing a subdivision application process is 12 to 24 months, and there's a couple of other processes that sit off the back of that. So we usually say from when SLA starts a project, greenfield project of this scale, it's 3 years to bring it to market. As much as we'd like to accelerate that, some of those processes just they're minimum timelines. So we try to move as quickly as we can, but Kenny's definitely not coming out to market this financial year. It probably won't be next financial year, but we'll see what the indicative land release published, and we'll work to that.
Just to go back to the block 1, section 228, just to, in terms of the car park, we are taking those car parks, the public car parks at the moment. So that's going to be a challenge because people need to use some other spot to park. At the moment, in the town centre, people, some of the apartments doesn't have enough parking, so people park in the illegal park, wherever they could. So now, I think we should consider as well enough car parks for those residentials. That's going to come.
So a little bit outside of SLA's area there. I understand there's been some petitions relating to that car parking function around those towers. So it's probably best for TCCS and whatnot to consider questions of that nature. Definitely understand the parking concerns, but definitely that one's better to go back to TCCS.
Okay, cool. And the Moncrief Group Centre, that one. So the time frame wise, so now we are saying the tender going to be released in mid 2024, and so like just to see once the tender happens, then what's the time frame we are looking for the end?
Yep, right. Sure. So a 2-stage tender, that one has already been released, and we do apologise for the time frame between getting the second stage out. That second stage is right around the corner, so again, probably mid-May. You'd find, just indicatively on your timeline, 3 months to resolve that tender, maybe a little bit longer than that with how tender out and then evaluating, so 3 to 4 months to resolve that process. After that, there'll be a exchange and settlement period. Now, that's not fully determined exactly how long that exchange and settlement period will be, but you could be talking 60 days all the way through to 180, 200 days. So maybe within 4 to 6 months, we should have resolved the sale of that site, and then you're looking at about 12 to 18 months for that to come out of the ground with navigating development applications and things like that. So we should be progressing the tender and the sale, hopefully, very soon, and then it'll be with the developer of how quickly they can navigate the
Are we going to put any clause on those land? We don't want to be like another cinema theatre that we have to wait forever.
No, for sure. So the Crown leases do, all of them, have a provision in there for the start of development and the end of development. There is provision for owners, lessees or developers to apply to have those extended. That doesn't happen with SLA. That's a planning directorate consideration. So I suspect a developer wouldn't want to sit on this one, but again, that's for them to navigate the timelines of their DAs and get it moving. There will be provisions within our project delivery deed and the Crown lease, and SLA will administer those provisions and try to navigate where we can that development happening as soon as possible.
Yeah, because it's been almost 7 years since Moncrief has built.
Sure.
So we don't want shops to be delayed further. So I think if they have some kind of clause just to make sure the developer not saying that they're going to do something and hold the block for doing nothing.
Sure.
We just want the momentum going.
Yep, no, understandable.
Yeah. Cool. Just with the Taylor Local Centre, so it says they exchange with the settlement schedule for mid-2024. Is it the same kind of schedule that we are looking similar to the Moncrief?
Pretty much. So that one's a little bit ahead of Moncrief because it doesn't. It's had a sale. It doesn't need to go through a tender evaluation process.
Yep.
So it should be settled. It's now with the developer, and we'll then work with that developer to try to get a schedule out in terms of them moving DAs through, confirming their intentions in terms of tenancies and services and offering. But that one, again, you might be talking 12 to 18 months to see something coming out of the ground, depending on how quickly they move their DAs through. So it could even be a little bit quicker on Taylor, given that buyer's maybe a little bit ahead of starting with their development intentions, noting they're not far away from settlement.
And with the local centre, at this stage, what would be there? Like it could be a shop, or is it like a community centre?
Yep. So there's a range of uses that are permissible on that land. There's a minimum requirement for commercial. and that could be a mix of things like community facilities, shops, other things. We haven't mandated the specific nature of what those shops look like, so the developer will be required to work out what is going to work and what is the catchment within Taylor is looking for on that site. We will be providing as a background document all of the community feedback that has showed what they feel would be useful on there, and so then the developer will look to what they think will be viable. So there will be an element of shops of some description on there. I can't guarantee exactly what that will look like at this stage.
Yeah. And so next to the local centre, it says community facility. Is it temple or is it?
That is the temple. For those familiar with Taylor, it is quite a nice looking building. They just had a major event a few weeks back. You would not miss that building if you were driving past there. It's definitely ornate. It's a very nice destination building. Yeah.
Okay. So okay. All right, cool. So the car park wise, so the local centre would have their dedicated car parks.
Yeah, look, it does, if you're familiar with that site, it does have the car parks connect up over there. This car park is intended to service a local centre. The temple does have their own car park, but look, there's some fluidity to be able to park in either or.
Yeah, so the local centre would have enough car park by itself because
the local centre's car parking has been provisioned based on the the anticipated use of the local centre. So it's provisioned probably very similar to Bonner, if you're familiar with that, in terms of that many car parking spaces. So that is what is deemed to be sufficient for that site. It should be okay. If anything, it might be able to offer surplus car parking for major events for the temple, and likewise, if the temple's not actively being used and the local centre's active, there's possibly some opportunity for some shared use within their joint car parking.
Yeah, and we got a question from online. Will the last remaining open air park and ride behind Big W be preserved in any future land release?
So that would be section 232 down the bottom there, which is currently I understand that's probably section 232, which is currently the park and ride. We are contemplating, as we do with the rest of the town centre, what are the development opportunities and timeline for that. It is identified as a future urban area, so there should be some expectation at some stage government will contemplate what is the use for that. I don't suspect it'll stay as an open air car park forever. It is a good comment in terms of parking provisioning within the town centre. So as government contemplates the uses for 232, parking has to be a solid consideration of how the town centre is provisioned.
Okay, cool, excellent. Thanks, Andrew. So another question.
Just in relation to that site we were talking about, just wanted to clarify, I believe there's a DA for part of that site being redeveloped at the moment.
Correct, yep. Apologies that I skipped over that one. So there was a government commitment under, I believe, the Parliamentary and Governing Agreement, but it might have been a different forum to do a community hub and youth centre. So that one's being driven by EPSTD primarily, but yeah, for sure. We've subdivided off a portion of that and that'll be transferred over. And I understand that they have navigated DAs through and will be hopefully intending to start some construction partway across 232. And I think there's also been a little bit of a look at that verge section 38 block of maybe a future youth centre. But yes, that's correct. There is part of that block has already been intended for that community hub, community centre.
Thanks, Andrew. Back to you.
So I might jump to the second part of my presentation. I might welcome Angela up if you can come. I'll catch up to where I was. So I might do by way of quick introduction. Angela knows Jacka very, very well, having worked on the planning and urban design team all the way back since about 2018. We have brought their team back on board to help us get Jacka Local Centre out there, and I would imagine that that's a good about face to be able to do all the initial planning and start to see some things come out of the ground. So we do have an active Your Say out on the Jacka Local Centre at the moment. It's following a similar pathway to the Taylor Local Centre, but further backwards. So we're in that engagement process of looking to seek input from community, government, stakeholders, everyone. So Your Say page and surveys are open 22 March to 10 May. We've been out there in a few different pop-ups. So we were doing the Easter event in Taylor a couple of weeks back. We're in the Gungahlin Town Centre a few weeks back, and we've got a couple of engagement processes popping up over the next little while. After the engagement process, it will again have a place and design framework or master plan for that site that comes out that helps to inform the sales process. So that'll look at all the questions that were asked on the other sites tonight. What's the appropriate uses, what level of mandating should go in there, what we give to the eventual developer. Now the Jacka Local Centre probably will go a little bit of a quicker pathway than Moncrief and Taylor, not in terms of beating them, but in terms of they had a longer two-stage process. We've had a bit of a look at that and taken on board stakeholder feedback. So this one is intending to go out under a single-stage process. So we are pretty hopeful that this one will go out late this financial year and then hopefully be wrapped up and resolved within that 3 to 6 month process where you get a in and out and a developer on board pretty quickly. I might hand over to Angela, if I can, just to go through maybe some of the initial voices or feelings that we've heard on the site and maybe some of the upcoming engagement processes or whatnot.
Thanks, Andrew. I won't take up too much of your time because we would like to spend a little bit of time, I guess, open. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
No worries. I won't take up too much time because we would like to take a bit of time for comments, clarifications, and we'd love for you to come over and check out the boards and really start to contribute to this engagement process in a genuine way. As Andrew said, we're at the beginning of this process and you really do have an opportunity to input into the future of this centre. So in terms of, I guess, what I wanted to capture tonight, we have commenced our engagement process, and I just wanted to highlight some of the emerging themes that are coming out of that. In terms of the engagement we've done to date, most recently we've had 2 pop-ups. We've also commenced engagement with schools, as well as Andrew said, we've got the Your Say page and surveys open there. I'd also like to welcome my colleague Marta, who is online and can drop that into the online chat as well if you want to access there. So in terms of what we're hearing, I think something that's coming through loud and clear, and what you can see in this image is that this centre is not going to be your average local centre. And what we're hearing is that's not going to be an average centre in terms of character or in terms of scale. There's, I guess, wide voices that say we have a unique opportunity here. With this local centre genuinely set within the landscape, we must leverage this. Leverage the connection to country, leverage the connection to landscape and nature. And what we've heard is the best way we can do that, or one of the best ways we can do that, is to connect an active travel and a cycle network directly into the center. And that's not just, I guess, the network, but it's also thinking about things like cycle and scooter parking and end-of-trip facilities that can sit here. We heard from someone, wouldn't it be amazing if I could go on a cycle loop in this beautiful natural area, land back in this center, have a coffee, and overlook the wetlands? So that's some of the feedback that we're getting. In terms of scale, we're hearing that maybe in this setting, Jacka Local Centre doesn't need to be a really large floor plate supermarket. Maybe it doesn't need to be a lot of chain shops. Maybe this is where we start to focus on commercial startups, or the opportunity for local boutiques and fresh fruit and veg shops, or even food trucks. In terms of, I guess, the other things that we're hearing again loud and clear, it's not just about retail. This centre has the opportunity to be about community events and community gathering. And that community gathering opportunity, maybe that could be free, or at the very least, be affordable. People are saying we want to be able to be part of this community, part of this activation, part of nature, without feeling like we have to come here and spend a lot of money. In terms of, I guess, those events, the other thing we've heard is that it's not just about daytime events. It's not just about daytime community gathering. We have heard from everyone, old, young, families, singles, that there is not enough nighttime activity and events within this area. So how can we facilitate that here? And yes, it is probably about a nighttime events calendar or a nighttime program of events, but we also heard developers need to think about having the infrastructure to facilitate that. So we need to make sure that we've got the appropriate lighting. We need to think about the open space as multi-purpose that might also function as a stage or an amphitheater seating or movable seating. we also need to think about how people use that space at night. You know, where are we going to project a movie? Is it a screen? Is it a wall? And can we make sure that everyone has access and everyone feels safe here, all ages and all abilities? So those are kind of the big ticket themes that we've heard to date, and we're really interested to hear your thoughts on your say, as well as coming over to the boards and just telling us what you want to see here. So I think with that, we can probably, if we've got time, open it up to some comments or questions.
Anyone have a question on the floor? Check. Just on the dot points you have, what are the things that you're planning to have, like including like viewing deck, community square, residential and retail? So the word residential, I just want to know what, you know, residential means, like it's different things. So we don't want another residential apartment or anything.
I'll be able to take that one if you like.
Yeah.
So within the planning of this one, there is intended to be a residential component, so it does have a yield within the approved estate development plan. Now that is, I think, quite valuable to getting a viable local centre that developers will look at. So you would expect to see residential. It won't be single residential, it'll be higher density, not high density, but higher. So maybe 4 to 6 stories you would be thinking around there, apartment type product. So there will, expectation is you'll see a residential component as part of this development.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Andrew, like, because we were going to plan those night events and all those things that we are considering. So how are you going to mitigate a residential area with those events that's going to happen around that place?
I'll maybe take that one quickly and throw to Angela if she wants to supplement. So that's the community's aspiration, again, relating to activation of that space and the tenancies and what events they look to operate. That'll probably be a matter for the developer to look at, you know, something like a cafe. They'll look at their operating hours, there'll be development conditions. So again, we are wanting to deliver on the community's aspirations, but there can sometimes be limitations around whether this will be a super active night precinct or whether you'd be finding more of your Gungahlin Town Centre takes on that range. It'd be definitely good to see it being activated for more than 12 hours a day, but ultimately the developers will have a look at what operating hours they can use, what are the events that they think will function within that space as part of the range there. There is a role for SLA and government to play in terms of trying to activate the space, but again, we are a shorter term custodian. We've got our mingle team that'll be there for a couple of years looking to activate, and then we transition out. So a lot of that longer term activation, and whether it's applicable uses between residential and local centre, that gets dealt with during the development applications.
I will build on that just a little bit, I guess, in saying that Andrew's exactly right. Nighttime events can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. You know, I don't think we're talking about massive music festivals that go to 3 a.m. here. You know, we're talking about things that provide this local community and surrounding areas the opportunity, you know, after hours to sort of, you know, sit together, have food trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's great about this place design framework is that early on, if that becomes an aspiration that can be realized, people buying into this area will understand that that's potentially on the cards and won't be surprised by that. But I would also say, probably lastly, that this is the center that we're looking at. There's a significant amount of open space as part of the broader Jacka estate and within this center. So there's the ability to provide some separation between certain events at certain times and the residential community.
Yeah, excellent point. It doesn't shop as well there, but if you look at the red line on the local centre, there's this quite large public domain off-street pavilion that is probably quite suitable to small-scale events and things like that, that was designed as a community gathering. So there is some of that public domain space that has been designed around flexibility for events and opportunities that we might even look at, you know, whether Mingle has a space in that in the initial 12 or 24 months and things like that. So even that local centre has been designed with some other sites in mind of all pointing towards a central gathering space. And even I think I talked on this one a few presentations back, it's actually kind of part of the entry experience. No matter which direction you come into Jacka, you will probably end up at this local centre if you don't turn off your road. So all of your collector roads tend to diverge around this central local centre.
So just to build on this one, Andrew, like with the public transport, we have the bus, with the Jack are always concerned because we know how we missed the stage 1 where buses couldn't go into Jacka. So with the public transport, so is there an option for there's a nearby bus stop for people to come into this area, and then with enough lights need to be considered, and then the public toilets and those kind of things? Have you guys considering?
I might jump into a few of those, might be easier. So just quickly to that first point. So the first stage of Jacka probably wasn't missed, so it's definitely a point noted, and we've heard from the community that they would have preferred to have a bus route through there. Typically the rules that apply there is within, I'm going to get this wrong, but about 500 metres or whatnot is the catchment for a bus. So all of that first part of Jacka was within the 90% walking distance of a bus stop. It just wasn't within a loop that went through Jacka. Next stages of Jacka absolutely have a bus routes planned within them, so there'll be stops very close to this local centre, and I don't know the exact routes, but there's 2 or 3 collector streets that will have active bus circulation through there. In terms of the public toilets, there are some rules through other parts of government that dictate what scale of parks and facilities that have toilets. So I would suspect that a developer would look at some type of toilets, but that'll be ultimately inside the local centre up to them. A lot of the parks and facilities throughout Jacka don't have public toilets as part of their design due to the fact that they're of a local scale, and you typically have to be up to a regional scale park to get that toilet facility. It is a comment that comes up a lot in our engagements around public spaces and public toilets, but that is a specification or requirement that's not fully controlled by SLA, so there are some complexities with getting public toilets within spaces, but again, the local centre, you would expect the developer will look at one or more provisioning within there. Lighting, I'm not 100% sure exactly the lighting around there. I think the public domain's got some approved lighting through the walking trails and whatnot. We could probably get back to you in terms of what exactly is the plan, but maybe it's good to circle back at the end of the place and design framework, because that may well have come up with the safe design spaces and active travel of what level of illumination happens. So that might be one that we can look at more specifically.
And just on the comment on the Jacka stage 1, the bus stop, that's the one reason where they're saying, we didn't have enough catchment, so that we don't have the bus. The main issue was they couldn't get the bus into the roads. The roads were very built very narrow. That's the main issue that happened with the.
Yeah. So, no, apologies if I wasn't clear with that one. So I think it was never intended to have a bus float through there, is my understanding of why those designs of the roads there. It was never intended to take a bus, because they've looked at the catchment of 90% of residential dwellings within that first stage were within the appropriate distance to a bus stop. It's definitely feedback we've taken on board, so I've heard from many people within that stage that they would have preferred a bus. So it was compliant at the time. We continue to adapt our approach. So definitely the second stage has got active bus routes all through it. But my understanding is it was never intended. So it wasn't a matter of a bus can't get in there. It is within the appropriate walking distances to a bus stop.
We had a conversation with the Transport Canberra when they came, why there's no bus, and their answer was the bus couldn't get into Jacka, and that's why.
Yeah, well, sure, if they were retrospectively looking to do route planning, you wouldn't get the current bus designs through there. But again, my understanding is when that part of Jacka was released, it was fully compliant. But there's definitely feedback we've taken on board, and that gets looked at as we're designing future greenfield estates.
Thank you. Any questions? I think.
So, 6 are the private open space. That one.
So as Andrew mentioned, there will be a mix here of mixed use, so commercial and retail predominantly on the ground floor that can spill out onto these open spaces, and there will be some residential at upper levels. So we want to make sure that there is private communal open space for those residents, and there's a separation between what is for the residents and what is for the general public. So that's that differentiation.
And we got a question online. Are there any plans for public artworks or a specific feature of note for the public community space?
That's something we're definitely asking the community about if they would like to see. There has been suggestions around art, around sculpture, around interactive play. That's been feedback we've had from the community. And there's also been feedback around how we I guess, how we determine as a community what that artwork is. Does it have an Indigenous reference? Does it reference some of the other heritage and nature of this site? But it's definitely something on the list and on the survey that we're asking people about what they'd like to see.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Just to write down or go through this board, and that'll be great. For those who are online, I think we do have a link. Someone posted the link on the one of the comments. Yeah, so we should have the USA link there, so you can also participate online. I think that's for tonight. And is there anyone have any other updates for Gungahlin?
Yes, I was just asking. Sorry, you want to come up there?
Yeah.
Thank you. Andrew Braddock, Greens member for Yerrabee. Updates we've got is, firstly, I was asking questions today about the Joint Emergency Services Centre, which you might have been aware of. They found diesel particulates and lead in the ceiling there, which caused a temporary closure of that. And you've seen the provision of services by both ambulance, police, fireys and Rural Fire Service and the SES, who are all located there, in a variety of different means. Whether it be demountables in the car park of the GCC, some have been located in the Gungahlin enclosed oval. So I was asking some questions today in the Assembly about that, in terms of they are undergoing a deep clean to remove that contamination, and will shortly undertake the inspection and hope to be able to reoccupy that building. That got assurances from the Minister that response times for emergency services in the Gungahlin district have not been impacted by those temporary arrangements, which is extremely good and heartening to hear. But it would be great to be able to see the reoccupation of the Emergency Services Centre. Noting, of course, there is still that project underway where we're looking to move out the ambulance and the fire services to a site in Mitchell, and then the police can occupy the entirety of the service centre, and there can be a refurbishment to increase their footprint and presence within there. Just trying to think what else.
Can I ask you a question on that one, Andrew?
Sure.
So where are they located now, all those emergency units? Like, they're all gone? The police station, are they mobile now, or are they based in somewhere?
It's a combination of elements. You might have noticed there's some demountable services, like for buildings for the police sitting in the car park of the GCC. Others, like the fireys, are currently located in the car park of the Gungahlin enclosed oval space, and they're also providing services from the other emergency services centres across Canberra. So, for example, some are coming out of Belconnen, some have been provided out of the inner north. So that's how they're sort of basically getting through, providing services into the Gungahlin region whilst they're doing the remediation of the GCC.
Okay. And the Minister said it's going to be resolved maybe in weeks, or in months, or in years?
No, this is a week's job. I don't think I got an exact time frame. No, I didn't. Yeah. But it's going to be short, because they are currently undertaking the cleaning job right now. Okay. And then it's just a case of having to pass the inspection to get back in.
Yeah, so because one of the questions that we kept being asked was, like, when would this going to resolve and stuff? So if we could get a time frame from the government, that'd be great.
Let me go back and check on my iPad and see if I've got a more exact time frame, but all I know at the moment is weeks.
Cool. Do you still have any upside?
Let's just see what else we're happening. Design works are still continuing in terms of the toilets and other public realm infrastructure for the Yerrabee Pond area. You might recall the government has made a commitment in terms of providing toilets both at the major playground area on Wonderlick Street, and also on the Besant Street playground, which is on the other Amaroo side. Plus there's also investments into various other public realm infrastructure around Yerrabee Pond. That is currently still undergoing design work, but that should be coming out shortly. which is really good because I want to see greater usage of that pond. I also want to, particularly what I've been advocating for is more path lighting around the pond so people feel safe to be able to utilise the pond at all hours of the day rather than just during daylight hours, which I've been trying to push. What's also been really good I've been pushing is you'll have seen the number of trees that have been planted over the Gungahlin region has been increasing quite dramatically. This is important because we as a region suffer quite a lot from heat island effect, just due to lack of permeable surfaces, lots of concrete, bitumen and so forth. That will help increase the tree canopy cover and coverage of the Gungahlin area. So we'll be able to address that. I might just hand over if there's any questions that people might have. I'm happy to answer those. Beyond me, just keep on talking.
Yeah, the only question, that's $1 million question, I suppose. When would the cinemas get, they're like every time we open the Facebook on Gunga,
Yep.
Where's the cinema, what's happening? And that's why that one of the concerns I kept saying to the SLA and the planning people, look, selling the land is the one thing, and how are you going to make that developer accountable for what they promised to do? And we don't want any of our blocks sitting on hold. So
Yep.
We know that so many dates has been deferred and all those things, and every time we go there, there's a different answers we get. So do we really know what's happening with that? And is it sitting with the ACT government, or is it sitting with the developer, or is it sitting with someone else? So do you know that?
It is sitting with the developer. So the particular block has been sold to a developer. They have an approved DA in place, which is required for construction to commence by, I'd have to check, I think it's in the first half of next year, but I'll get back to you on the exact date about that. They are currently within the conditions as set by their Crown lease, so there's nothing at this point in time that the ACT government can do about that. But I agree entirely with the frustration of you and many members of the community, because I want to see that piece of land being utilised for the entertainment of the community, plus also having employment, connection, coming together, which unfortunately we've just not seen realised for that particular block. So
yeah, like how do you see that, in future? I see it like kind of a failure of the government because we don't have enough good classes that can make the developers accountable.
Yep.
How are you going to fix it? Like, are you guys working on anything that you can fix this process for the future development, where we can make that the developer accountable for those time frames and making the commitment fulfilled for the community?
Yep. And so there's a couple of levers the government has. One is in terms of the rates that the developer is currently paying for those that block of land, and whether those are sufficient to incentivise economic development and the developer to actually get moving on doing that. And I've been calling on the government to review those rates and determine whether those incentives are appropriate or not. The second is enforcement of the actual lease conditions, which does not yet apply to that particular block, but will shortly. And in terms of what are the penalties or the enforcement of the actual lease conditions if a developer fails to actually meet a condition which usually states must develop by a certain period of time. Or for example, they have a development application which is due to expire, I think, in the middle of next year. What's the penalty if they fail to take any action whatsoever on the block? And again, it's that enforcement and compliance question which I find that the government just sometimes fails to follow through with, and hence we're not seeing the action that involves utilising the land to the best possible benefit of the community.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the update. No problem. Thanks to put you on the phone. All right. Thanks, everyone, for your time tonight, and if you joined us on Facebook, thank you very much. And I just want to close with one thought. In ACT, Gungahlin, any council or not a council, similar to what we have in other states. So it's completely different. So for your day-to-day needs, you probably need to ring Access Canberra. They're the one who's in charge of fixing your bin or roads or whatever the issue. But we are happy to help you in that. But if you want to contact and get some help directly, you can do it. And we are a completely voluntary-based organisation, and we all work full time, and thank you for my XED team for putting their time for the community as well, and thank you for all the speakers who came tonight, and thank you for the people who attended today. We really appreciate your time today, and yeah, thank you so much, and God bless, and have a good night. Thank you.